Tony Bennett was often described as the gentleman of music. His soft smile, warm personality, and gentle way of speaking made him seem like someone who could never hold a grudge. He worked with stars across generations, from Frank Sinatra to Lady Gaga, and he remained admired by both old and young audiences. On stage, his charm was undeniable, and behind the microphone, he always appeared humble and grateful. Yet, very few people knew that behind this friendly image, Bennett carried a deep dislike for another singer. For decades, this secret stayed hidden, even from many of his closest friends. He never spoke about it in interviews, and he never let it ruin his career, but the feelings he carried were real and personal. According to those close to him, he finally admitted the truth when he was near the end of his life. Around 2021, this hatred was not simply about music or competition. It was personal and bitter, lasting for more than 50 years. To understand why this mattered so much, we need to look at the journey of Tony Bennett himself, a man who rose from poverty to stardom, faced failures and comebacks, and built one of the longest and most respected careers in music history. Tony Bennett was born Anthony Dominic Benedetto on August 3, 1926. In Queens, New York, his parents were Italian immigrants who came to America hoping for a better life, but what they found was hardship and poverty. The family lived in a small, cold apartment where money was always short and food was never guaranteed. When Tony was only 10 years old, tragedy struck. His father passed away from heart problems, leaving his mother to raise 3 children alone during the Great Depression. His mother worked long hours as a seamstress in a sweatshop, barely making enough to pay rent. Tony remembered times when furniture was taken away because the family couldn't keep up with payments, and they often relied on soup kitchens for meals. Despite the struggles, Tony showed talent at an early age. At just 10 years old, he was chosen to sing at the opening of the Triborough Bridge in New York, performing in front of thousands, including the mayor. That moment showed him that his voice had power, even if his life at home was filled with hardship. By age 13, he was working as a singing waiter in Italian restaurants, serving food, and then performing for customers. Each note he sang was not only entertainment, it was survival, helping put food on the table for his family. As a teenager, Tony continued to pursue music, while also trying to support his family. He attended art school in Manhattan, showing talent in painting as well, but eventually dropped out at 16 to work full-time jobs like grocery clerk and elevator operator. Music, however, remained his passion. In 1944, during World War II, Tony was drafted into the U.S. Army and sent to fight in Europe. He experienced the horrors of war firsthand, including the Battle of the Bulge, where thousands of soldiers lost their lives. These years left a deep impression on him, and he later became a lifelong supporter of peace and justice. During breaks in the fighting, he would sing with military bands, bringing comfort to soldiers. After the war, the GI Bill gave him a chance to study music more seriously, and he trained under a vocal coach who advised him not to copy other singers, but to learn from jazz musicians. That advice shaped the unique style he became known for. By 1949, he was performing under the name Joe Barry in clubs around Greenwich Village, struggling to be noticed. His big break came when singer Pearl Bailey heard him and invited him to open her show. This moment led him to Bob Hope, who gave him the stage name Tony Bennett and introduced him to a wider audience. That was the beginning of a career that would last more than 7 decades. By the early 1950s, Tony Bennett was becoming a household name. He signed with Columbia Records in 1950 and released his first big hit, Because of You, in 1951. The song reached #1 on the charts and stayed there for weeks, selling over 1 million copies. Soon after, he released Cold Cold Heart, a cover of Hank Williams's country song, which also became a massive hit. His ability to cross genres and connect with audiences made him stand out. In 1953, he released Rags to Riches, a song that perfectly fit the American dream spirit of the time. It sold millions and became one of his signature songs, later used in movies like Goodfellas and The Godfather. Through the 1950s and 1960s, Tony had dozens of hits like Stranger in Paradise, Blue Velvet, and I Wanna Be Around. He wasn't just a pop star, he was also respected in the jazz world, working with legends like Count Basie and Art Blakey. In 1962, he recorded his most famous song, I Left My Heart in San Francisco. At first, he nearly skipped recording it, but when he did, it became one of the greatest songs in American music history. It earned him 2 Grammy Awards and became his lifelong anthem. During these years, Tony Bennett's fame was at its peak, and he was admired by both audiences and critics. Despite his success, Tony Bennett faced many challenges in his personal life. His first marriage to Patricia Beach in 1952 eventually ended in divorce after years of separation. He then married actress Sandra Grant, but that relationship also had difficulties. At the same time, the music industry was changing rapidly. Rock music began to dominate in the 1960s, and Columbia Records pressured Bennett to adapt. In 1970, he released an album of contemporary covers, including Beatles songs, but he hated the project and even admitted that recording it made him physically ill. His loyal fans didn't like it either, and rock audiences ignored it. His record sales dropped sharply, and his label eventually dropped him. By the mid-1970s, Bennett's finances were in trouble. He started his own label but couldn't keep it running. The IRS came after him for millions in unpaid taxes, and his lifestyle in Los Angeles was too expensive to maintain. To make matters worse, he struggled with drug addiction, particularly cocaine, which almost killed him in 1979 when he overdosed and nearly drowned in his bathtub. His wife saved his life that night, and Tony later described it as a moment of divine intervention. It became a turning point, forcing him to seek help and rebuild his life. By the late 1970s, Tony Bennett's career seemed over, but then his son Danny stepped in to manage him. Danny realized that chasing trends was a mistake and instead reintroduced Tony to younger audiences by booking him at colleges and small theaters. Slowly, Tony rebuilt his reputation. By the 1980s, he was back with Columbia Records, but this time with full creative control. He focused on the Great American Songbook, staying true to his style instead of trying to copy modern music. In the 1990s, something unexpected happened. Younger generations began to rediscover him. His 1994 MTV Unplugged performance shocked the industry. The show was mostly for rock and grunge acts, but Tony's performance became one of the most popular episodes. The live album went platinum, and even won the Grammy for Album of the Year. This comeback was not just about survival. It showed that timeless music could connect across generations. He became a cultural icon again, not just for older fans, but for young people as well. In his later years, Tony Bennett enjoyed enormous success through collaborations. In 2006, he released Duets, an American classic, featuring artists like Paul McCartney, Elton John, Stevie Wonder, and Barbra Streisand. It was a huge success, proving that he could still compete at the top of the charts. In 2011, he released Duets 2, which featured stars like Lady Gaga, Amy Winehouse, and Mariah Carey. At age 85, he became the oldest living artist to debut at #1 on the Billboard charts. His duet with Amy Winehouse, Body and Soul, was her last recording before her death, making it especially emotional. Later, his partnership with Lady Gaga produced Cheek to Cheek in 2014 and Love for Sale in 2021, both earning him Grammy Awards. By the time he passed away in 2023, Tony Bennett had won 20 Grammys, sold over 50 million records, and released more than 70 albums. What made his success so unique was that most of his Grammy wins came after the age of 60, showing his ability to remain relevant for decades. While Tony Bennett's career was full of positivity, love for music, and inspiring comebacks, he was still human, like anyone else. He had his dislikes and personal grudges. According to those close to him, one of the few singers he truly disliked was Martin Scorsese's frequent use of Italian stereotypes in movies, and the singers who leaned into that image. Though he admired many performers, there was one particular entertainer, he felt misrepresented Italian Americans in a negative way. Reports suggest that Tony carried a long-time bitterness toward this performer, but kept it private for most of his life. Only in his final years, as he battled Alzheimer's, did he admit to friends that his dislike was deeply personal. While the name may never be confirmed, what stands out is how quietly he carried this resentment. He never allowed it to affect his career or public image. To his fans, Tony Bennett remained the kind, smiling gentleman who spread joy through his music. But behind that smile, there was at least one story of hurt and disappointment that he never fully shared with the worth. Tony Bennett passed away in July 2023 at the age of 96, just 2 weeks before his 97th birthday. He left behind not just songs, but a legacy of resilience, humility, and love for art. He also gave back to the community by founding the Frank Sinatra School of the Arts in his old neighborhood of Queens, proving his belief in the power of education and creativity. His life story shows the journey of a man who started in poverty, faced war, achieved incredible success, lost almost everything, and then rose again stronger than before. The hidden resentment he carried reminds us that even the most admired figures have private battles and personal feelings. But in the end, Tony Bennett will always be remembered not for the hatred he carried, but for the love he shared through his music. His songs remain timeless. His influence continues across generations. And his story proves that true artistry can survive every storm. Tony Bennett's later career and changing music world. As music trends shifted in the 1970s and 1980s, many traditional singers struggled to find their place. Rock, pop, and disco were taking over the charts, while jazz and standards became less popular. Tony Bennett faced this challenge too. At one point, he even tried to adapt his style to fit the times, recording songs that were more in line with modern tastes. However, this move did not feel natural for him, and the results were disappointing, both critically and commercially. For a while, Bennett's career seemed to be fading, and many thought he had already passed his peak. But Bennett was not ready to give up. Instead of forcing himself into a new mold, he eventually decided to return to what he did best, singing classic American songs with elegance and emotion. This decision became the foundation of his remarkable comeback. Bennett's return to his true style showed the world an important lesson. Authenticity matters more than chasing trends. His voice, even as it aged, carried a depth of feeling that newer artists could not always match. His concerts slowly began attracting not just older fans, but also younger listeners who had never heard his music before. It was as if his passion for timeless songs reminded people that good music never truly disappears. This period also taught Bennett that while fame can rise and fall, true artistry always finds a way back. His story became an inspiration not only for other musicians, but also for anyone facing setbacks in their careers or personal lives. Throughout his life, Tony Bennett worked with many of the biggest names in music. From Frank Sinatra to Lady Gaga, his collaborations bridged generations and styles. Sinatra himself once praised Bennett as the best singer in the business, a compliment that Bennett carried with pride. Later, his duets album with Lady Gaga proved that even in his late 80s, he could still connect with young audiences. Their partnership was not just about music. It showed a beautiful bond of respect between two very different artists. Gaga often said that working with Tony reminded her of why she loved music in the first place, and she admired his pure dedication to his craft. But not every relationship in Bennett's career was smooth. Just as the title of the story suggests, there were times when he held strong negative feelings towards certain singers. While he never publicly revealed much about these private emotions, insiders suggested that Bennett sometimes disliked artists who, in his view, disrespected the traditions of jazz and standards. He was passionate about preserving the integrity of music, and when he saw performers who were more focused on fame than artistry, it frustrated him. For Bennett, music was sacred, and he expected others to treat it with the same seriousness. Even though he kept most of these feelings private, close friends admitted that there were certain names Bennett would never celebrate or endorse. In his later years, Tony Bennett faced one of the most difficult battles of his life, Alzheimer's disease. Diagnosed